The evening started like any other. The city outside was calm, the streetlights flickering weakly and the faint sound of cars passing by in the distance. Inside the apartment, however, the air carried a strange tension. He sat on the bed staring at the new figure that had become a part of his daily life. His roommate, an alien named Rytel, was not someone he ever expected to live with. When he first signed the papers for the exchange program, he thought it would be nothing more than an odd experiment, maybe something he could laugh about later with his friends. After all, how many people could say, "I lived with someone from another world"? But now, as the quiet evening shifted into night, he began to feel a strange weight pressing down on his chest. Rytel was not like a normal guest. His presence was heavy, almost suffocating. Rytel sat in the corner of the room, his tall figure almost blending with the shadows. His skin shimmered faintly under the yellow bulb, shifting between shades of gray and silver. His eyes glowed with a soft blue light like the reflection of the moon on still water. He did not blink often. When he did, it was slow, deliberate, like someone who was always calculating. The man, narrator of this story, couldn't shake the feeling that those eyes were not just looking at him, but through him, as if reading every thought he tried to hide. At first, he tried to act normal. He set his phone aside, adjusted the blanket, and lay down, telling himself that this was just a roommate. Just a being from another planet, nothing more. He had promised himself that he would not be afraid, but fear is not something you can control. Hours passed. Midnight came. The silence in the apartment grew thicker, almost alive. He woke up suddenly, his throat dry, his lips cracked. All he wanted was a glass of water from the kitchen. Slowly, he pushed the blanket aside, stood up, and walked toward the door. His steps were careful, trying not to disturb Rytel, who still sat in the corner like a stone statue. But the moment his hand touched the door handle, a deep grinding voice broke the silence. "No leaving." The words froze him in place. He turned around sharply. Rytel was standing now, his tall figure towering near the door. His glowing eyes were brighter, almost sharp, and they locked onto him like a predator watching prey. I just need some water," the man whispered nervously. His heart began to pound faster, each beat echoing in his ears. Rytel did not move aside. He repeated, his voice heavier this time. "No leaving." The man forced a nervous laugh, though it cracked halfway. "What do you mean, no leaving?" "This is my apartment. I can go wherever I want." But when he pulled the door handle again, it did not open. He pulled harder. Nothing. Then he realized the door had been locked from the outside. His stomach twisted. His breathing grew shallow. He turned back toward the alien, his voice shaking. Why did you lock it?" "What the hell are you doing?" Rytel tilted his head as if listening to something far away. His glowing eyes flickered faintly, and then he spoke again, slow and careful. "You stay safe. Danger outside." The man's confusion only grew. Danger? He had lived in this building for years. The neighborhood was quiet. The street outside was empty. There was nothing dangerous about it. But Rytel's tone was so certain, so commanding, that it silenced his protests for a moment. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, and whispered, "What danger?" Rytel's answer was the same, but quieter this time, almost like a warning to himself. "No leaving." The man stepped back slowly, his body tense, his mind racing. Was this alien dangerous? Was this some strange custom from his planet? Or did he know something the man didn't? The silence grew heavy again. Only the sound of his own breathing filled the room. He returned to the bed slowly, his eyes never leaving Rytel. The alien stood at the door, unmoving, watching, guarding. The minutes felt like hours. His fear only grew. Every creak of the old apartment walls made him jump. Every shadow in the corners seemed darker than before. The man's thoughts ran wild. Maybe he's unstable. Maybe letting him stay here was a mistake. Maybe I won't even survive this night. But then he saw Rytel's expression. It wasn't violent. It wasn't cruel. It was protective. His glowing eyes softened slightly whenever they turned toward the bed, almost like a guardian keeping watch. Still, fear gnawed at him. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't escape. He felt trapped inside his own home. At last he whispered into the silence, not even sure if he wanted an answer. "Why are you really doing this?" Rytel did not reply immediately. Instead, he pressed his ear against the door as though listening for something on the other side. His whole body stiffened. His eyes glowed brighter. Then he spoke again in that grinding, heavy voice. "Because they are here." The man's blood ran cold. They? Who was they? And why did he suddenly feel that he was safer inside this locked room than anywhere else? The room was dark, only the dim glow of the streetlight sneaking through the curtains. The man sat frozen on the bed, his heart still echoing with the alien's last words. They are here. He wanted to believe Rytal was just imagining things. Maybe it was a cultural misunderstanding. Maybe they meant something else entirely. But the way Rytal's eyes glowed, the way his voice dropped into something low and heavy, it felt too real to dismiss. The silence outside the door stretched endlessly, slowly. The man stood up again, his legs trembling beneath him. He walked toward the door and grabbed the handle. It was cold, stiff, unmovable. He pulled once, twice, harder the third time, but the door didn't open. The lock held strong, frustration rose in him, burning hot in his chest. "This is insane," he whispered. "I can't be locked inside my own room." He turned toward Rytal, who still stood tall and silent by the door. His glowing eyes followed every movement. "Open the door," the man demanded, his voice shaking with both fear and anger. Rytal didn't move. His gray skin shimmered faintly, and when he finally spoke, his voice was heavy, like thunder rumbling in the distance. "No leaving." The man clenched his fists. "I don't care what you think is outside. I live here. This is my home. You can't lock me in like some prisoner." But Rytal didn't respond. Instead, he tilted his head again, listening to something the man couldn't hear. His glowing eyes flickered, brighter, sharper, as though he saw danger that wasn't visible to human sight. The man stepped closer, his anger growing stronger than his fear. "I said open the damn door." He grabbed Rytal's arm and pulled, but it was like pulling against solid stone. The alien didn't even flinch. Instead, Rytal lowered his head slightly, his glowing eyes softening. His next words came out slower, almost gentle. "You are not safe." The man froze. Something in that tone cut through his anger. It wasn't a threat, it was concern. Still, confusion tore at his mind. Safe from what? "What are you talking about?" Rytal did not answer. The man stepped back, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Fear returned, crawling back under his skin. The silence felt heavier now, thick enough to choke him. Minutes passed like hours. He sat back on the bed, his head in his hands. He wanted to scream. He wanted to break something. But more than anything, he wanted to understand what was happening. He looked up again. Rytal was still guarding the door, unmoving, as if he were a statue carved from stone. The man studied him, searching for a clue, some explanation. "Please," he said softly, his anger drained. "Just tell me what's going on. I don't understand." For a long time, there was silence. Then Rytal spoke, his voice quieter than before. "They hunt," the man's breath caught. He opened his mouth to ask who or what. But before he could speak, a sound outside the apartment froze him in place. It was faint at first, a light scratching, like nails dragging across wood. His stomach tightened. The scratching grew louder, moving along the wall outside, closer and closer to the bedroom. His skin prickled. He looked at the window, then back at the door. His throat was dry, his heart thundering. What is that?" he whispered. Rytal's glowing eyes flickered as he pressed his head close to the door, listening. He growled, a low rumbling sound that made the man's blood run cold. "They are here," Rytal said again, firmer this time, his voice vibrating through the air. The scratching stopped suddenly. The silence was worse than the sound. The man held his breath, afraid that even breathing too loud might bring whatever was outside closer. Then faintly came another sound, something dragging across the floorboards in the living room. Slow, heavy, wrong. The man's entire body trembled. His mind screamed at him to hide, to run, but there was nowhere to go. He was trapped in the very room he thought was his prison, yet now it felt like the only safe place left. Rytal turned his head slightly, speaking in a low voice. "Stay back." The man obeyed, stumbling backward until his knees hit the edge of the bed. He sat down, staring wide-eyed at the door. His palms were sweaty, his whole body tense. Then it happened, a sudden thud against the door. The man jumped, his heart nearly stopping. Another thud followed, harder this time. The wall shook faintly, he gasped, panic rushing over him. "Oh my God. Oh my God." But Rytal didn't move. He stood tall, his broad shoulders squared, his glowing eyes unblinking. His hands, claw-like and sharp, flexed slowly, as though readying for a fight. The thuds grew faster, louder, as if something, or someone, was trying to break through. The man pressed his hands against his ears, tears burning his eyes. Fear swallowed him whole. Finally, the pounding stopped. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. The man dared to open his eyes again. Rytal was still standing strong, his chest rising and falling slowly, his claws gleaming faintly in the dim light. The man whispered shakily, What are they?" Rytal finally turned his head, meeting his gaze. His glowing eyes were colder now, more serious. "Hunters." The word cut through the silence like a blade. The man swallowed hard, his body trembling. He wanted to ask more, but his voice refused to come out. He sat frozen, staring at the alien who had locked him in, the alien who seemed to be the only thing standing between him and the nightmare outside. The night stretched on, heavy and endless, and for the first time the man realized maybe the locked door wasn't a prison. Maybe it was protection. The man sat frozen on the bed, his heart racing so hard that he could hear it pounding in his ears. Every muscle in his body felt tight, ready to snap. The memory of the loud thuds on the door replayed again and again in his head. He couldn't escape the sound. It lived inside his chest now, echoing with every beat of his heart. The room felt smaller than ever. The walls seemed to close in, the air heavy, suffocating. His breath came in shallow gasps, and no matter how hard he tried to calm down, his chest wouldn't loosen. Rytal still stood guard at the door, tall and unmoving. His glowing blue eyes did not waver. He looked like a soldier, like someone who had done this before, maybe too many times. The man watched him in silence, searching for a sign, any sign that the danger had passed. But Rytal's sharp claws flexed slowly and his body remained tense. That told the man everything he needed to know. Whatever was outside, it wasn't gone. The silence in the apartment was worse than the noise. At least when there was scratching, dragging, pounding, the man knew something was there. But now, there was nothing. Nothing but his own ragged breathing and the faint hum of the streetlight outside. Then, he heard it. A faint scrape against the glass of the window. The man's entire body stiffened. His eyes shot toward the window, and his stomach turned to ice. Slowly, with shaking legs, he stood up and took a step closer. His hands trembled at his sides. Outside the window, just barely visible in the pale glow of the streetlight, something moved. A tall, thin shape stretched upward, too tall to be human, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't bend. Its head tilted sharply, snapping from side to side like a bird listening for prey. The man's throat tightened. His voice came out broken, barely more than a whisper. "Oh God." The figure stopped moving. Its head jerked toward the window. The man stumbled back, his heart slamming against his ribs. His legs almost gave out beneath him. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The creature pressed its face against the glass. The man's stomach twisted in horror. Its mouth opened slowly, too wide, impossibly wide, and jagged teeth scraped against the glass. A sound like nails on metal filled the room. The man clutched his ears, tears forming in his eyes. His body shook violently like he was standing in the middle of a storm. Behind him, Rytal growled. The sound was low and deep, vibrating through the room like the growl of a beast warning off another predator. The creature outside snapped its head toward the door, then back to the window. Its jagged mouth opened and closed, opening far beyond anything human. The man collapsed onto the bed, curling into himself. He couldn't take it. His mind screamed at him to hide, but there was nowhere to go. His chest tightened, every breath a struggle. He felt like a child again, terrified of the dark, helpless and small. The scraping against the glass stopped suddenly. The creature pulled back, disappearing into the shadows. For a few seconds, silence returned. But the man knew better now. The silence wasn't safety. The silence was the sound of predators waiting. Why me?" he whispered, his voice breaking. his eyes filled with tears. "Why are they here?" Raital finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "They smell you." The man's head shot up. "Me?" Raital turned his glowing eyes toward him. "Yes, they want you." The man shook his head violently, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I don't understand. I didn't do anything. Why me?" But Raital did not answer. His attention was fixed back on the door, listening for every sound, every movement in the hallway outside. The man pressed his hands against his face, his body trembling uncontrollably. His heart ached, his chest heavy. He had never felt so powerless. The walls of his own home had become a cage, and outside that cage lurked monsters he couldn't even begin to understand. Minutes crawled by, slow and merciless. Every creak of the old floorboards, every shift of the shadows sent his heart into panic. He was trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. At one point he heard a soft clicking sound outside the door, like claws tapping against wood, slow and deliberate. He pressed his back against the wall, pulling his knees close to his chest, his whole body shaking. Raital's growl returned louder this time. It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise of violence. The clicking stopped. The man buried his face in his hands, sobbing quietly. He couldn't take it anymore. The fear was eating him alive, tearing at his mind. Finally, in a weak and broken voice, he shouted toward the door. "Why are you doing this to me? Why won't you let me out?" Silence followed. Then Raital's voice came again, steady and unshaken. "Because if you go out, they take you." The man's sobs grew heavier. His chest burned, his throat raw. He felt small, fragile, like a single candle fighting against an endless storm. The night stretched on, unending. Every second was a battle to stay quiet, to stay sane. He curled, up on the bed trembling, staring at Raital's tall figure by the door. He hated the alien for locking him in. He feared him for the secrets he wouldn't share. But at the same time, he clung to the thought that Raital was the only thing standing between him and those creatures outside. The fear was unbearable. But the truth was clear. If Raital hadn't locked that door, he wouldn't have survived this long. And somehow that thought was even scarier than the monsters outside. The man's body trembled violently on the bed, his mind trapped between terror and disbelief. The sounds outside had not stopped. They had only grown quieter, more deliberate, like hunters circling their prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He slowly turned his head toward the window. The faint glow of the streetlight revealed nothing at first, only the cracked sidewalk, the empty road, and the silhouette of a tree swaying in the wind. He tried to convince himself that the shadows, the scratching sounds, were his imagination. He tried to tell himself that Raital was overreacting, but deep down he knew better. He felt it before he saw it. A presence. Something unnatural moving just outside the glass. His chest tightened, a cold sweat running down his back. Every instinct screamed for him to run, but the locked door and Raital's watchful stance froze him in place. Then he saw it. A shape, impossibly tall and thin, moving with a strange, jerky rhythm that made his stomach turn. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, like metal wires twisted into a human shape. Its head swiveled unnaturally, scanning every corner, every shadow. It was searching. He gasped, his hands shaking so violently he could barely cover his mouth. The creature's eyes, if it had any, were impossible to see. Its face was a dark blur against the night, but the outline of its jagged teeth was visible when the streetlight reflected off the glass. And then it pressed its face against the window. The man froze completely, his breath caught in his throat. The sound that came from the creature's mouth was low, wet, like someone dragging nails over metal. His stomach churned violently. He wanted to scream, to run, to vanish, but the bed beneath him held him in place, a prison and a lifeline all at once. He looked toward Raital, desperate for some reassurance, some clue that he wasn't imagining this. The alien was still, tall and unmoving, glowing eyes locked on the window, every muscle tense. "They are outside," Raital said, his voice low and steady. "They smell fear. They hunt it. They will not leave until they have it. The man shook violently. Fear? They feed on fear? His voice was almost inaudible, cracked with panic. Rytal didn't answer. Instead, he moved slightly, shifting closer to the door as if ready to block anything that came through. His claws flexed, catching the faint light, sharp and glinting. The man's mind raced. His apartment, once a safe and familiar place, now felt like a cage. Every corner, every shadow held potential death. Every sound outside made his heart hammer harder. He realized he had never felt so powerless in his life. Another shape appeared outside the window. This one was even taller, its limbs bending in ways that made him dizzy just to look at them. It moved silently, smoothly, like a predator on a mission. It stopped, head tilted, staring directly into his room. The man stumbled backward, his body pressed against the wall. Tears ran down his cheeks as he whispered, "Why? Why me? Why? Are they here?" "They hunt all who are alone," Rytal said, his voice a mixture of warning and resignation. "You are not alone now." The words barely comforted him. If he wasn't alone, it was only because Rytal had chosen to stay with him, to guard him against horrors he could barely comprehend. The man's fear mingled with something else, gratitude. A strange attachment to this alien who had become his protector, his shield. The scraping sound returned, closer this time, coming from just below the window. His stomach dropped. He wanted to close his eyes, to cover himself with a blanket, anything to hide. But he knew hiding would do nothing. The creatures outside could see him, smell him, hear his every heartbeat. He glanced at Rytal, who crouched slightly now, ready. The alien's glowing eyes seemed to pierce the shadows outside. He felt an odd mixture of fear and hope. The alien was dangerous, but he was on the man's side. Suddenly, one of the creatures lunged toward the window, its clawed hand scraping against the frame. The man jumped, screaming involuntarily. His back hit the bed, knocking over a lamp that shattered on the floor. He covered his head with his arms, shaking violently. Rytal moved in a blur, faster than the man's eyes could follow. The alien pressed himself against the window, claws slashing at the creature. There was a wet, sharp sound, a scream from the predator, and then silence. The man peeked through his fingers, heart in his throat. One creature lay motionless on the sidewalk below. The others retreated slightly, still circling, still hunting. "Stay back," Rytal growled. "They are patient. They wait for weakness." "Do not show it," the man nodded, too terrified to speak. He pressed himself against the wall, tears blinding him. His body shook uncontrollably, but he obeyed. He stayed, he watched. He survived. Minutes passed. Hours, maybe. Time had no meaning. Every sound outside, every shadow made him jump. But with Rytal by his side, he slowly began to realize that fear could be endured, that someone or something stronger than the darkness could protect him. The street outside remained ominous and quiet for a moment, the shadows retreating into the corners. But the man didn't relax. He had learned a valuable lesson. The world was not safe. Not in the way he thought. Not in the way he had always known. Yet for the first time that night he realized he wasn't completely powerless. He wasn't alone. And as long as Rytal stood guard, he had a chance. Still, the shadows would return, and he knew the next encounter would be even closer, even more terrifying. The night stretched endlessly. The man hugged his knees to his chest, watching the glowing eyes of his alien roommate. He whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, I don't know if I can survive without you." Rytal only watched, silent, unwavering. But in that moment, the man understood the truth. The alien wasn't just strange or frightening. He was a shield, a protector, and perhaps the only friend he could trust in a world that had suddenly grown far too dangerous. And outside, the shadows waited. The night felt endless, stretched thin like a shadow across the man's mind. Every second brought the pounding of his heart, the racing of his thoughts, and the constant fear that the creatures outside would find a way in. He no longer dared to move from the bed. Each time he thought about reaching for water, or even adjusting the blanket, a small noise from the hallway made him freeze in place. Rytal had not moved from the door since the first encounter. He stood tall, unmoving, his glowing blue eyes scanning every inch of the room, every shadow beyond the window, every creak in the floorboards. His presence was overwhelming, almost frightening in itself. Yet it was also the only thing keeping the man anchored to reality. At first, the man had been angry. Angry that he had been locked in. Angry that he could not move freely. Angry that he was trapped in a nightmare he did not understand. But as he watched Rytal's steady stance, he began to see it differently. The alien was not just guarding the door, he was guarding life itself. Every sharp movement, every flex of clawed fingers, every glow in those impossibly bright eyes said one thing clearly: I will not let them take you. The sounds outside began again. A soft scratching, careful and deliberate, moved along the walls. The man's stomach dropped, bile rising in his throat. He pressed his face into the blanket, hoping to make himself invisible. He knew it was pointless, but he could not stop. The fear was too strong. Rytal growled low and deep, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards. The scratching stopped. For a moment the night was eerily silent, but it was the kind of silence that made the man's skin crawl. He dared to peek through his fingers. Outside, shadows shifted along the walls, darker than the darkness itself. The creatures were patient. They waited. They circled, seeking weakness, seeking fear. And they could smell it, sense it. The man's trembling heart was a beacon. You will not move, Rytal said in that low, grinding voice. You will stay. You will survive. The man nodded, too terrified to speak. He hugged his knees to his chest, tears sliding down his face as Rytal remained a sentinel between him and the nightmare outside. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly. The creatures did not leave. They prowled. They whispered through the shadows. They tapped claws against glass and metal. Every sound sent spikes of terror through the man's body. But through it all, Rytal never wavered. His posture remained perfect, his glowing eyes never leaving the windows or the hallway. At one point, one of the creatures tried to force open the window. Its clawed hands scrapped against the frame with unnatural strength, groaning and rattling the glass. The man screamed involuntarily, burying his face in the blanket. But before the creature could break through, Rytal moved. The alien's movements were impossibly fast. One swipe of his clawed arm, one flick of his glowing hand, and the creature recoiled with a wet, sharp sound, retreating into the darkness. Rytal's stance remained steady, unshaken. The man watched, awestruck, realizing for the first time the sheer power of his roommate. You are amazing," he whispered, shaking. "I can't believe you're doing this for me." Rytal's glowing eyes flickered at him, but he did not speak. His hands flexed again, claws gleaming faintly in the dim light. His presence alone was enough to keep the man safe. The man realized something then. It wasn't just fear keeping him alive. It was trust. Blind trust in someone who was completely different, someone he could not fully understand, yet someone who had devoted himself entirely to protecting another life. Minutes passed. Then hours. He did not sleep. He could not sleep. Every tiny sound outside made his body jerk with tension. But still, Rytal remained vigilant, guarding every inch of the room. Every breath, every glance, every movement was deliberate, precise, unbroken. The man's mind drifted, trying to comprehend the alien's motives. Why was he doing this? Why protect a human? Rytal had shown no reason, no explanation, only action. Perhaps it was instinct, a natural duty ingrained in him. Perhaps it was something more, something deeper that humans could never understand. The man's fear began to blend with awe. He realized he had never met someone or something so entirely dedicated, so entirely selfless. Rytal was frightening, yes, but he was also magnificent. A being of otherworldly power, standing in the night, defying creatures that the man could not even name or imagine. The creatures outside returned, more persistent now, moving silently along the walls, circling the apartment like predators assessing their prey. Their eyes, impossible to see clearly, seemed to glint with malice. Their claws tapped lightly on the window frame, a soft, chilling rhythm. Rytal's glow brightened. His stance widened, shoulders squared, claws ready. The man felt a strange calm wash over him. Not because the danger was gone, but because he knew that whatever happened, this alien would not fail. The thought was comforting in a way he had never expected. Hours passed. The creatures never entered. The man did not sleep. He did not eat. He did not drink. He did not even breathe properly. But he survived. Every time he opened his eyes, Rytal was there. Every time he shivered, Rytal's presence reassured him, silently declaring, I will not let them take you. By dawn, the creatures were gone, retreating into the shadows. The street outside was quiet, still as if nothing had happened. The man finally allowed himself to exhale, feeling the tension drain from his body. He was exhausted, broken, trembling, but alive. Rital's eyes softened as the first light of morning crept into the room. The alien finally moved away from the door, standing calmly as the man slowly rose from the bed. His body ached, his mind was weary, but he felt something he hadn't felt all night. Gratitude, pure and overwhelming. You kept me alive, he said quietly, voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you. Rital's glowing eyes flickered faintly. He did not speak. He only nodded once, simply as if words were unnecessary. His actions had already said everything. The man sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the events of the night. He realized that this alien, strange and terrifying as he was, had done something that no human could have. He had protected life itself, with a dedication and strength beyond understanding. And in that moment, the man understood the true meaning of the word guardian. Not just a protector of doors or walls, but a shield for the vulnerable, a being willing to stand between life and death without hesitation. He looked up at Rital, still glowing softly in the dim light, and whispered, Thank you. My life is yours to guard if you will accept it. Rital's stance relaxed slightly. The threat was gone for now. But the man knew deep down that the alien would remain vigilant, ever watchful, ever ready, for as long as danger lurked in the world outside. And for the first time that night, the man believed that maybe, just maybe, he could survive anything. The first light of dawn crept slowly through the blinds, spilling pale gold across the room. The darkness that had once felt so suffocating began to fade, replaced by a quiet stillness that was almost unbelievable. The man blinked against the weak light, his eyes raw from exhaustion, tears still lingering from the terror of the night. For hours, he had remained huddled on the bed, frozen in fear, clinging to the knowledge that Rital was standing guard outside the door. The alien had not slept, not rested, not even shifted his weight beyond the smallest necessary movements. His glowing eyes had been the only constant in a night filled with incomprehensible terror. Now in the calm of early morning, the man could finally breathe. Slowly, shakily, he rose from the bed, feeling his muscles stiff and sore. He glanced around the room, taking in the damage left by the creatures. Scratches along the walls, shattered pieces of the lamp, faint dark streaks on the floor. The chaos of the night had left the apartment scarred, but it was still standing. Rital remained at the door, tall and unyielding, though his stance had softened slightly. The blue glow of his eyes pulsed faintly, no longer sharp with tension but still alert, still aware. The man's heart swelled with gratitude and something else, something he hadn't realized until now. Awe. He took a hesitant step forward. It's over, he whispered. The night, it's over. Rital's head tilted slightly, listening to the distant city outside. The street was empty now, quiet except for the soft hum of morning life slowly waking. No shadows moved along the walls, no claws scratched the glass. The danger had passed, at least for now. The man sank back onto the bed, exhaustion washing over him in waves. His body shook, his mind still reeling from the events of the night. He could hardly believe he had survived. For hours he had felt the presence of death outside the walls, circling, waiting, and through it all one being had stood between him and the unknown horrors. You saved me, he whispered again, voice breaking. Tears streamed down his face. I don't know how to thank you. Rital's eyes flickered faintly, softer now, almost gentle. He did not speak. Words were unnecessary. His presence had been protection enough. His actions had said everything that words ever could. The man's mind wandered, trying to understand the alien's motives. Why had he done this? Why had he risked everything to protect someone so small, so fragile, so utterly human? He had no answers, only a deep sense of gratitude and wonder. He looked at Rital more closely now, noticing the faint scratches along his arms and shoulders. The alien's skin, normally smooth and shimmering, had been cut and marked in the struggle. His glowing eyes had dimmed slightly, a sign of fatigue, but his stance remained unwavering. The man's chest tightened. You didn't have to do this, he said softly. You didn't have to stay up all night, fight them, protect me. You could have left. You could have saved yourself. Rital's head tilted as if considering the words. Then he simply said in his deep, grinding voice, Your life is worth guarding. The man's tears fell harder at that simple statement. The alien, so different, so strange, had chosen to protect him, not out of obligation, not out of duty, but because he had deemed him worthy of protection. The weight of that choice sank deep into the man's heart. He slowly rose to his feet, knees unsteady, and walked toward Rytal. For the first time, he dared to reach out and touch the alien's arm. The skin was cool beneath his fingers, shimmering faintly even in the morning light. He could feel the strength, the tension, the tireless effort of a being who had stood between him and monsters all night. "Thank you," he said again, voice trembling. "I don't know if I would have made it without you." Rital's glowing eyes softened further. He did not speak, but he didn't need to. The man understood. He had been saved, guarded and protected by someone who existed in a way humans could hardly imagine. The apartment was quiet now. The city outside stirred gently, unaware of the horrors that had circled the building just hours before. The man looked around at the scratches, the broken lamp, the dark streaks on the floor, and realized that these marks were not just damage, they were proof. Proof that he had survived, proof that Rytal had fought for him, proof that even in a world filled with unimaginable danger, life could endure. He sank back onto the bed, feeling the exhaustion fully hit him. His eyes closed for the first time that night, and he allowed himself a brief moment of rest. Even as he slept lightly, he could feel Rytal's presence unwavering, just a few steps away. The alien had not left his side, not once, even when he had closed his eyes. When the man awoke fully, the sunlight was stronger, spilling across the room in warm, golden rays. The horrors of the night seemed distant, yet the memory was sharp in his mind. He had faced unimaginable fear, and he had survived, thanks to a being he barely understood. He looked at Rytal, who now leaned lightly against the wall, arms crossed. His glowing eyes were softer than they had ever been, almost serene. The man felt a surge of emotions he couldn't name: fear, gratitude, awe, and something else. Trust. For the first time since the night had begun, he spoke without fear, without trembling. I owe you everything," he said. "You didn't just protect me, you made me realize I can survive. I can face anything because I'm not alone." Rytal's glowing eyes flickered faintly, acknowledging the words. He did not need to respond. The man understood perfectly. The alien had stood vigil through the darkness, had faced horrors no human should see, had risked himself without hesitation. That was enough. The man took a deep breath, looking out the window at the quiet street below. The creatures were gone. The night's terror was over, and though he knew it could return, he also knew that as long as Rytal remained by his side, he had a chance to survive. Finally, he let himself smile. A small, shaky smile, but a smile nonetheless. He was alive, and he was not alone. For the first time, he realized the truth of the night: protection, courage, and the bond between beings, no matter how different, could overcome even the darkest fear. And he knew that he would never forget the alien who had stood guard all night. Unwavering, tireless, and magnificent. The sunlight filled the room completely now, chasing away the shadows that had haunted the night. The man sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted, his body heavy with fatigue, but his mind alive with thought. He watched Rytal, who remained close to the door, tall and still, a silent sentinel even in the calm of morning. The man realized something then, something he hadn't understood before. Rytal had not only protected him from the creatures outside, he had shown him something greater. A strength beyond human, a dedication beyond what he had ever known, and a selflessness that left him in awe. You stayed all night for me," the man said softly, almost as if speaking aloud would make the memory of the night more real. "You didn't rest. You didn't sleep. You just watched, guarded, and fought. Why?" Rytal's glowing eyes flickered faintly, almost as if weighing the words. Then he spoke, slow and deliberate, "Because life is worth protecting. Even yours." The man's chest tightened. He had survived, yes, but now he understood the truth of what had happened. The creatures, the shadows, the terror, they had been real. He had faced a night that no human should face, and yet he was alive. Alive because someone had cared enough to stand between him and death itself. He looked at Rytal more closely. The scratches and marks from the night were faint now but visible, proof of the battles fought in silence. proof of the alien's sacrifice. His glowing blue eyes softened, and the man felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. A combination of gratitude, relief, and wonder. I owe you everything, he whispered. Not just my life, but everything I am now. I couldn't have survived without you. Rytal's head tilted slightly. He did not speak, but the man could feel the acknowledgement. There was no need for words. The alien had chosen by action to stand between life and death. That choice had saved a life. And in that act, the man saw something extraordinary: courage, loyalty, and the kind of strength that reminded him what humanity could aspire to. It was then that the man realized the night had changed him. He had been terrified, yes, but he had also learned to trust, to accept help, to see the value of another being's life, even if that being was not human. He had seen a power greater than himself, and it was not brute force alone. It was discipline, vigilance, and the willingness to sacrifice. He swallowed hard, eyes misting over. You didn't just protect me, you made me believe in courage, in loyalty, in life. Rytal's glowing eyes flickered again, a faint pulse that seemed almost like understanding. He stepped closer, and though his presence was still imposing, it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt safe, protective, almost comforting. The man laughed softly, shaky and uncertain. I never thought I'd meet someone like you. Someone so extraordinary, and now I can't imagine being without you. Rytal tilted his head as if pondering the words. Then, in that low, grinding voice that had commanded silence all night, he said something simple yet profound. You are alive. That is enough. The man felt tears welling again, but this time they were not from fear. They were from awe, from gratitude, from the realization that someone, something, had risked everything to protect life that was fragile and fleeting. For the first time, he looked beyond the fear, beyond the terror of the night, and saw something greater, a bond forged in adversity, a connection between two beings from different worlds, united by the simple yet profound truth of survival and care. He stood slowly, moving toward Rytal. I don't know what to call you, he said, voice soft. Friend, guardian, protector? Rytal's glowing eyes met his, unblinking, and for a moment the man felt that he understood. Words were not important. Titles were not important. What mattered was that the alien had chosen to protect him, had chosen to endure the night, had chosen to fight the darkness without hesitation. And in that choice, the man saw something larger than fear, larger than survival. He saw hope. He reached out, gently placing his hand on Rytal's arm. The alien did not pull away. Instead, the warmth of life, the silent affirmation of connection, flowed between them. The man's heart swelled. For the first time that night, he felt something he had almost forgotten amid terror. Trust. You are incredible, he whispered. I don't think I've ever met anyone like you. I hope I never forget this night. I hope I can live up to the courage you've shown me. Rytal's eyes glowed softly, steady and unwavering. The man realized then that the alien had not only saved his life, but had also shown him a path forward, a way to be brave, to face the unknown, to trust in others and in oneself. Outside, the city was waking. Birds sang, cars hummed, life continued. But the man felt changed. He had stared into the abyss and survived, and he knew that the memory of the night, the memory of Rytal's unwavering vigil, would stay with him forever. He smiled. A real smile this time, tired but genuine. Thank you. For everything, he said, voice breaking slightly. For saving me. For staying, for being extraordinary. Rytal's glowing eyes flickered once more, faintly like a pulse in the quiet morning. Then he simply stepped back, allowing the man space, but remaining nearby. Always nearby, a protector, a friend, a silent guardian. The man sank back onto the bed, exhaustion heavy in his limbs, but his heart lighter than it had been all night. He realized the truth. The night had been terrifying, yes, but it had also revealed the extraordinary. Life, courage, and the bond between beings, even from different worlds, was something no fear could destroy. He closed his eyes, finally allowing a sense of peace to wash over him. The creatures had gone, the night had ended, and he had survived. Not alone, but with someone who had shown him the truest meaning of vigilance, courage and care, and as the sunlight bathed the room in warmth, He whispered softly, more to himself than to anyone else. I will never forget this night. And I will never forget you. Rital's glowing eyes watched him silently, unwavering, a testament to the night's trials and triumphs. And in that quiet, the man felt a bond stronger than fear, stronger than distance, stronger than anything he had ever known. The night was over, but its lessons, its courage, and its extraordinary protector would live with him forever.